When I was 18 years old, Ahmad Jamal changed my life. I was a freshman in music school, and I was just starting to study jazz music. And one of my mentors and instructors took a brave and interesting track, and also humbling for me, in setting aside teaching me to play, and instead worked on teaching me to listen. So I was on a steady diet of jazz music of all different types and from different places, and there was one particular album that really stood out to me, and that was Ahmad Jamal's Live at Montreal Jazz Festival in 1985. Ahmad is a piano player. He's playing with a jazz trio. When I listened to this album, I heard music in a different way. I felt like I could hear the conversation of music. I could hear communication. I could hear musicians exchanging ideas between one another, direction, intensity, phrasing. I heard this subtle language that I hadn't heard before. I remember one particular riff on track 5, when there were tracks to albums, Rossiter Road. And Ahmad was leading the band through a rubato section, which means it's a give and take of tempo and rhythm and time. And so it's loose, and the band follows the leader with the rhythm of his melody. So Ahmad is playing, and he's pushing, and he's pulling, and he's leaving all sorts of space. And he comes to the end of this big open section, and he plays one little riff. Boop-ba-dup, boop-ba-dup, bop-boop-dop. And the bass player responds with a timekeeping retort, boot-twee. And boom, they land on a downbeat, driving into a walking section with complete intensity and powerfully in sync, playing together as one. And they did it out of space. And I must have listened to that like 1,000 times to figure out how they did it. How they did it was through communication and by setting aside themselves, playing for the greater good. I could hear this. I could hear them playing for the group, for the audience, for the piece of music. Music was never the same again. So it wasn't just an influence for my musical career. It was a pivotal example of collaboration that still inspires me to this day. So I want to talk about collaboration. How can we do more of it? But in order to talk about collaboration, I think you have to talk about some of the barriers to collaboration. I think we're naturally disposed to have some obstacles in our way. As illustrated in a musical example, we're performance-based. So we're concerned about our own contribution, what we're going to say, what we're going to do. We need to validate our presence. That can give us a little tunnel vision, and maybe we talk more and listen less. We're also competitive by nature. We want to win. We got to look out for number one. This can lead us to measure accomplishment more than experience and process. This can lead us to compete against potential collaborators in our community. When we look at our communities, we tend to draw tight boundaries, rigid boundaries, and put our communities and our collaborations into little boxes. I think we also fear the unknown. Lack of control scares us. So we want to grip tightly to make sure we have it ratcheted down and we have control. We also tend to look at our finished product, the thing we want, first. And then we're going to go find the ingredients to build that. We do this at a breakneck pace. And the internet, the digital age is not helping us any. We're moving faster than ever. When we start projects, we're behind from the get-go. In 1997, I was in the Hamilton Street Pub in Saginaw, Michigan, drinking Pabst with the formative brewers and entrepreneurs of the Michigan brewing scene. It was an exciting time. In 1993, we had 3 breweries in the state. By 97, there were more than 30, and a year later, it would be over 60. We were forging a new path. We were creating new flavors, making the scene look differently. It was a moment of change that was thrilling. But I'm not here to tell you the story about how together we were and how we were there celebrating this community. We were there drinking Pabst with a Budweiser truck parked out in front for good measure because we were being called out on our pettiness. We'd been told, you guys need to get in the same room. You're all complaining about the same things and nobody's talking to one another. So a meeting was called, let's get everybody together. And I can remember offering some sage advice, or what I thought was sage at the time and now looks a little childish. I said, well, we're going to need neutral territory because they're not going to come here, we're not going to go there. Nobody wants to be in each other's backyard. So if you want this meeting to happen, we better head out for neutral territory. So there we were. But what happened at that meeting was we talked about what we had in common. And we decided we wanted to see more Michigan beer made, sold, promoted. We wanted more awareness. And from that common goal, we decided to form the Michigan Brewers Guild. And a year later, we hosted our first summer beer festival in Ypsilanti. Now, there's something that has to be magically bonding about pounding tent stakes together, renting too few porta-johns, and running out of beer fest essentials like ice and pretzels. Because everything changed after that day and that project. And it wasn't the whatever marketing impressions we got of 800 people attending our first festival. It was that we were both figuratively and literally in the same room, that now we knew each other. We'd worked on a common project together. We'd worked for the greater good. And we had each other's phone numbers, so when things came up, we could call one another. I think that familiarity is also something that sets aside some of the bristly competition that we can naturally have, that your opponent can be the evil empire. It's really easy to assign negative characteristics to the evil empire you're trying to win against. Prior to that, we were so dead set on winning that we hadn't yet seen that we were in a battle together as community. So by working together, we found that we could welcome talent besides our own and celebrate it. We could work together, and we could compete more healthily. I like to talk about it as competing with your siblings, the idea of sibling rivalry. Because I come from a large family, and there's nobody you wrestle harder than your brother. But you also reach out and help pick him up out of the dirt, and you would stand between anybody that threatened him harm. So when you have community, you have family, and from there you work together in a different way. Today I'm proud to say that there's more than 200 breweries in the state of Michigan, and Michigan is regularly regarded as one of the top scenes for brewing and now distilling in the country. I'm very proud, and when people ask me that, when people ask me, how did it come to be, what's so special about Michigan, I always think back to that time when we decided to collaborate. So what is our community? Is it our street, our block, our neighborhood? Is it our county or state? Our work, our industry? Our schools, our projects, or causes? Again, I believe the barriers that we tend to put these in little boxes, and I want us all to pan back and get a wider perspective and see the atypical collaborators and partners that may be out there. Last fall, I was sitting around a campfire, and I watched my friend Drew carve a wooden camp spoon out of a chunk of firewood, and he handed it to our camp chef. I know that may seem contradictory to have a chef in camp, but we did. And Drew handed him the spoon, and he made us gumbo with the spoon. And while that may seem like a quirky collaboration in all of itself, I was looking around this campfire, and I saw artists and storytellers and musicians and woodworkers and really interesting, passionate people of all kinds. And I was just so excited to see that that group of people and collaborators had come from an altogether different collaboration. We were on the Road Home to Craftsmanship tour. It was our launch tour to put out the collaborative beer that New Holland made with Carhartt, called the Carhartt Woodsman. And they'd come to us to commemorate their 125th anniversary. And the interesting thing is a lot of people think it would be great to have a brewery make a beer for them. But what happened here was different because we didn't look at it as a private label. We didn't say happy anniversary on a piece of paper and put it on a product. We asked ourselves questions about each other's stories, about our brands, about our customers. And through this, we both set out to collaborate. And these conversations brought us to something we had in common. When we first started talking about this with other people outside our groups, we got quizzical looks, and what does clothing have to do with beer? And usually, as I started in, people were finishing my sentences because I started talking about, well, we're two Michigan companies who really value craftsmanship. We both are companies and brands that value the customer experience over everything else. And that's when people saw the community that we had. They saw the bond we had. They said, oh, I can't wait. I'm looking forward to that. It completely makes sense. So by looking less literally, we saw that we had community. We became family, and we worked together and made something great. I have the great pleasure of living with and working with horses. I began this as an adult, and when I first started learning to ride with my horse Blackjack, I had to learn to sit through the spook. So the spook is when the horse gets startled and frightened and makes some unpredictable movement. Well, Blackjack's specialty was when he was startled, he would stop on a dime and pivot 180 degrees before you could think of your next thought or word. You were facing backwards. And so one's natural reaction is to grip the horse with your legs and grab the reins tightly and hold on and stop any future movement. Get control, grip tightly, hold on. Well, what I had to learn was that reaction, that startle to his startle, actually blocked communication. So I needed to loosen my grip. I needed to relax. I need to have a conversation. Because from conversation comes leadership. From leadership comes trust. So can you imagine if somebody we were working with was startled by something and looked like they were about to bolt, and our reaction was, oh my God, stop, go, panic. Well, that's what a beginning rider might do. That's what they're saying to this horse, this professional nonverbal communicator. But by learning to relax and let things look a little different and have this conversation, this two-way dialogue, we're able to say, it's all right. Let's look where we're going. Let's go there together. And horses have been an amazing influence on my life, and their ability to communicate, I felt like I was learning another subtle language that really sent me back to the music school days. Learning to listen changed my collaboration through communication. A beginning cook starts with a recipe. Maybe they read it in a cookbook. I want to make this. Now I got to go find out where all the things are. And they do this without regard for where they are in the country or the world, what time of year it is, or what's around them. It's a natural place to start when you're learning to cook. I've been inspired to turn that on its head by many chefs and restaurateurs that have inspired me by taking a look at what's around us first, finding the beautiful things, being a curator for those beautiful things around us, and then building dishes and making things from that, showcasing those ingredients in the very best light. I think that's where art lies. It's in common with the artists of all kinds, whether it's a woodworker with wood or a metal worker with steel or a painter with paint and a paintbrush. Celebrating the beauty around you and following that path is a way to collaborate not only with people, not only with other living beings, but with our world, focusing on what is and going from there. There's another common theme in all of this, and that collaboration takes time and it takes conversation. I always like to use the metaphor of being a good gardener, because a gardener is going to nurture the soil that they have, they're going to foster an environment for growth, and they're going to plant a seed. But what happens when they plant the seed? Seems like nothing at first, but it's where everything starts. So we have to be patient. We have to allow growth. We have to allow time and conversation. This will not only, I think, nurture stronger collaborations and deeper root stock, but it lets us enjoy the process as well. It may not seem like you're doing much sitting in a chair out in the grass in the sunshine watching your garden grow, but it sure is enjoyable. So I hope these stories have brought to light some different ways we can look at what it is to work together and collaborate, and also how we can hold a more ongoing collaborative posture. This isn't about specific projects where everybody has to list who's involved. I think this is about holding space, to be a good listener, to compete more healthily, to look beyond our literal ties into our communities and find different ways we can work with what is. Loosening our grip so that our communication can be more connected. We can celebrate all this around us, slow down and enjoy the ride. So we all get asked very early, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, as you might see from this picture from 1973, I'm with my older siblings, and my first answer was cowboy. It's followed by stuntman, and from the third grade on, I wanted to be a professional musician. And I can't fault third grade me for not knowing that a life and career as Beervangelist existed. But there's a larger point here. And the point is that the things that I like to do, the things that I'm passionate about, are about creatively communicating ideas, about nurturing an idea from concept to execution, about being a generous collaborator and a good host, helping people feel comfortable and enjoy their lives more. These passions of mine, they've been with me throughout all these different jobs and positions and roles, because passions transcend our jobs. And I think if we add on to what we want to be when we grow up and we think about how do we want to be and how well can we work with others, then our passions will follow us everywhere, and we'll share them with people, and we'll be inspired by theirs. I think it'll make better team members, better family members, and better partners. So these passions are what have fueled the craft renaissance that I believe has changed the world. And it goes beyond the brewers and distillers, baristas, bakers, butchers, chefs, farmers, and restaurateurs that have inspired and changed the world of food and drink. And it goes much beyond that into any trade where people have a passion for their craft. We're seeing this return to a connected lifestyle happen everywhere around us. And the thing about a renaissance is it doesn't happen from one person, one organization, or one segment of the industry. It's like one giant, loosely held collaboration. And the thing is, I don't compete against my collaborators. I compete against apathy. I believe that as long as people care, everything's going to be all right, and the world is going to keep getting better. So I want to challenge us to look around ourselves, in this room today, in our communities, in our world. Let's think about how can we work together? How can we collaborate? How can we work with what is and change the world today? Thank you.